Welcome back to What the Study Says. I'm Dr. Kai.
And I'm Dr. May. You know the feeling.
Yeah.
You wake up in an absolute cold sweat.
Right.
Your heart is just pounding out of your chest. Your breathing is super shallow. And why? Because you were just being chased down the cereal aisle of your local grocery store by a highly aggressive grizzly bear.
Naturally.
Right. And for some totally inexplicable reason, you completely forgot to wear pants.
It's always the pants.
Always. And the whole experience is just deeply vivid, totally bizarre, and incredibly stressful. So why does the brain subject us to this? I mean, is it just some biological glitch, like a random misfiring of neurons in the dark?
Right.
Or is it actually a vital, highly tuned biological mechanism keeping us alive?
It's such a phenomenal question. I mean, in our clinical practices, we see patients all the time who are they're exhausted or even terrified by their own sleep patterns.
Totally.
People come in wanting to know why they have these recurring nightmares or, why their dreams are so wildly disconnected from their waking lives.
Yeah, and we really wanted to get past the ancient myths and the pop psychology on this. So as doctors, we've been independently diving into the actual clinical and scientific literature on sleep.
Yes, pulling together literally decades of research. We're looking at everything from the foundational neurophysiology papers from back in 1977 all the way through the latest post-pandemic clinical data from 2024.
Right, and our mission for this deep dive is to really synthesize all of this literature. We're going to explore the actual mechanisms, the evolved functions, and the true meaning behind your dreams.
Exactly. Because whether you are desperately trying to decode that recurring nightmare about showing up late for a final exam,
the worst,
or you just want to know what your brain is up to for a full third of your life on this planet, this data is going to fundamentally change how you view your time asleep.
You are not just powering down like a laptop. I mean, you're undergoing a deeply complex, highly active biological process.
Absolutely. And to really understand why you're dreaming about a bear in the produce section, we can't just start with the psychology. We really have to start with the hardware.
The brain itself.
Right. We need to look at how the brain physically generates a dream state. So let's look back at a landmark 1977 paper by these researchers, Hobson and McCarley.
Okay.
They proposed what's known as the activation synthesis hypothesis.
Which is a mouthful.
It is. But through their research, they demonstrated that dreaming isn't initiated by some mystical guardian of your subconscious. It is driven by raw mechanical biology.
Okay, so how does that actually work?
Well, during REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, a very specific, super ancient part of your brainstem called the pons basically just turns on.
Yeah.
And it starts generating these really powerful, spontaneous sensor motor signals.
Right. They refer to these as PGO waves in the literature. And from what I understand, these aren't like carefully structured messages, right?
Well,
They're just intense, almost completely random bursts of electrical activity firing off in the dark.
yeah, they are highly erratic. Now, while your brainstem is firing off these random electrical sparks, your forebrain is maintained in this state of continuous active alertness.
Oh, right. What neurobiologists call being tonically activated.
Exactly. The forebrain is the higher level evolutionary newer part of your brain. It's the part responsible for logic, narrative construction, making sense of the world.
So it's basically sitting there wide awake in a sense.
Right. And suddenly it starts receiving this massive influx of chaotic, noisy data from the brainstem.
Wow.
And confronted with all that noise, the forebrain does what the human brain does best. It tries to find a pattern. It tries to synthesize a narrative to fit the random neural firing.
Okay, let's unpack this. Is the brainstem essentially acting like a chaotic movie projector, like just throwing random, explosive special effects and disconnected audio tracks onto a screen?
Yes.
And the forebrain is an exhausted screenwriter desperately trying to write a coherent plot to match all these random explosions?
That is a brilliant way to visualize the mechanics of it, yes. The brainstem fires an electrical signal that perfectly mimics the physical sensation of running.
Okay.
A millisecond later, it fires another signal that mimics the intense physiological feeling of anxiety.
So the forebrain scrambles to connect those two data points.
Exactly. It says, okay, we feel anxious and we are running.
Yeah.
We must be running from a bear.
That's amazing.
It synthesizes the random biological signals into a hallucinated reality.
Oh,
But if your brain is simulating the feeling of running from a bear, there's a very obvious, really dangerous problem.
yeah, you might actually try to physically run.
Right.
Which brings us to the concept of atonia.
Yes, atonia. It's the genius safety mechanism built into this entire system. During REM sleep, Your brain doesn't just block sensory input from the outside world.
It goes a step further.
It actively sends inhibitory signals down your spinal cord. It releases these specific neurotransmitters that effectively paralyze your voluntary motor neurons.
You are chemically locked in.
Completely. You might be dreaming that you're sprinting away from that bear, and your motor cortex is firing the exact same intense commands it would if you were actually on a track.
But those signals they hit a literal chemical roadblock in your spinal cord.
Exactly. They never reach your legs. You don't act out the dream.
Which is terrifying to think about, honestly, but absolutely brilliant from an engineering standpoint.
It really is.
And the literature shows us exactly what happens when that specific spinal blockade breaks down, right? It results in a condition called REM sleep behavior disorder, or RBD.
Yeah, the clinical cases of RBD take that concept and show us the real-world consequences. When that paralytic mechanism fails, sometimes due to specific degenerative lesions in the brainstem, patients lose that chemical roadblock.
And they literally act out their dreams.
They do. The clinical studies highlight cases where patients are dreaming of fighting off intruders or running from skeletons.
Oh, wow.
And they will leap out of bed, eyes completely closed, and actually start throwing heavy punches or sprinting headfirst into walls.
That's so dangerous.
There was one heavily documented case where a man was dreaming about running for a football touchdown.
Okay.
And he grabbed his sleeping wife's head in a headlock and tried to spike it like a football.
Wow. I mean, it just proves that the motor commands being generated in your brain during a dream are very, very real.
Absolutely real.
The only difference between dreaming about running and actually physically running is just that tiny chemical blockade in your spinal cord.
That's it.
So we know the mechanics. We know the projector is firing erratic sparks and the spinal cord has us paralyzed. But why does the forebrain bother writing a script at all?
Like a great question.
If the brainstem is just generating noisy signals, does the movie that your forebrain desperately stitches together actually mean anything to your daily life?
Historically, the scientific community was incredibly divided on this. If we look back to Freud, dreams were viewed as wish fulfillment.
Right, classic Freud.
He theorized they were psychological safety valves for suppressed, often taboo desires. In that framework, the bizarre elements of dreams were just clever disguises for things we secretly wanted but couldn't consciously express.
But modern cognitive science has largely abandoned that model, hasn't it?
Yes, entirely. Researchers like Calvin Hall and William Domhoff spent decades meticulously analyzing thousands of individual dream journals.
Wow, that's a lot of reading.
Mountains of data. They wanted to see what people were actually experiencing. And they proposed something entirely different called the continuity hypothesis.
And the continuity hypothesis basically states that dreams aren't some cryptic disguised wish. They are just direct dramatizations of our waking conceptions.
Exactly. They reflect our general everyday concerns.
So if you're stressed about your relationships, your family, or your upcoming school exams, that is what populates the dream.
Right. The dream world is just a continuation of the waking mind's emotional state, projected into this hallucinatory sandbox.
Makes sense.
They found that if you are highly anxious about your finances in your waking life, you don't dream up some deeply disguised Freudian symbol of a cigar.
You dream about losing your physical wallet.
Or you dream about your house suddenly collapsing. The dream is directly continuous with your waking emotional concerns.
But a lot my earo as dig deeper into those dream journals, the data reveals a profoundly strange absence, right?
Yes.
This is one of the most fascinating details in the studies to me. Think about your own day today. You probably spent 8, maybe 10 hours staring at a screen, reading emails, typing on a keyboard, or looking at spreadsheets.
Sad but true.
If dreams are just reflections of what we do during the day, you would assume we'd constantly dream about the things we spend the vast majority of our time doing.
You really would.
But we don't. The data shows that people almost never dream about reading, writing, or typing.
It is a massive statistical anomaly. In surveys of hundreds of frequent dreamers like people who spent their entire adult lives doing administrative office work, the occurrence of reading, writing, or calculating in their dreams was virtually zero.
That's crazy.
The brain completely filters those modern activities out of the simulation.
Which naturally makes you wonder about the purpose of all this. If the brain is actively filtering out 90% of our actual mundane daily routine and just playing back the overarching emotional hits, what is the point?
Right.
Some cognitive psychologists, like David Folks or Owen Flanagan, have argued that dreaming is basically a spandrel.
A biological byproduct.
Right.
The classic analogy is the heat generated by an incandescent light bulb. The light bulb is designed to create light. The heat is just a useless, unavoidable accident of the physics involved.
Ah, okay.
These researchers argue that while the biological act of sleep serves a vital purpose like memory consolidation and flushing neurotoxins from the brain, the conscious narrative experience of the dream is just useless noise. It has zero adaptive function.
But looking at this from a clinical perspective, I have to push back on the spandrel theory.
Oh, absolutely.
If dreams are a totally useless, accidental byproduct of evolution, why do they feel so incredibly emotionally profound? Why does a nightmare leave you physically shaking for an hour after you wake up? Evolutionary biology is usually incredibly efficient. Nature doesn't tend to waste vast amounts of neurological energy creating deeply immersive, emotionally devastating virtual realities every single night for no reason at all.
No, it doesn't.
There has to be a utility to the experience itself.
This raises an important question. If the content isn't just a meaningless byproduct, and it clearly isn't just a perfect mirror of our boring daily routines, since we aren't dreaming about Excel spreadsheets,
Right.
then what exactly is the brain choosing to simulate? To answer that, we have to look past our modern lives. We have to look at the environment where the human brain actually evolved.
Which brings us to a groundbreaking framework proposed by cognitive neuroscientist Adria von Suo.
Yes, the threat simulation theory.
It completely reframes the biological purpose of dreaming.
It really does. Ravansuo argues that dreams are absolutely not spandrels, and they aren't internal therapists trying to help us process a bad day at the office.
Okay, so what are they?
Dreams are an ancient, evolutionary, virtual reality simulator specifically designed to rehearse threat perception and threat avoidance.
Wow.
Think about it. In the ancestral environment, human life was incredibly short and full of constant mortal danger. You were dealing with apex predators, rival human tribes, and sudden natural disasters.
It was terrifying.
If you encountered a severe threat in your waking life back then, you had exactly one chance to survive it. If you failed, you were removed from the gene pool.
But in the dream world, you can run the simulation 100 times safely.
Precisely.
You can get eaten by the bear in your dream, wake up, and your physical body is perfectly fine.
You can constantly rehearse escaping, fighting, and hiding without any physical risk. And the data from modern dream content analysis strongly supports this evolutionary mechanism.
That's so.
When researchers analyzed thousands of modern dreams, they found a staggering statistic. 80% of the emotions experienced in human dreams are profoundly negative.
80%.
Fear, anger, apprehension, extreme confusion. Misfortunes in dreams are 7 times more frequent than good fortunes.
That's wild.
Unprovoked aggression is the most common social interaction. The dream world is inherently overwhelmingly hostile.
And it gets even more fascinating when you look at the specific data on children's dreams. You would naturally assume that a modern 5-year-old, sleeping safely in a quiet suburban bedroom, would dream about the things they see every day: cartoons, toys, playgrounds.
You would think so.
But the studies showed that up to 40% of the animal characters in young children's dreams are wild, untamed threats.
Yeah.
We're talking about bears, giant snakes, wolves, and monsters. And this happens even if the child has literally never encountered one of these animals in real life.
That data point is crucial because it indicates our brains are essentially pre-programmed with ancestral threat scripts.
Wow.
The human brain comes out of the box ready to simulate the specific environmental dangers that hunted our ancestors for hundreds of thousands of years.
That is incredible.
As we grow older and our brains realize our modern environment is mostly safe, those specific animal threats slowly decrease in our dreams. But the baseline factory setting of the human brain is to simulate primitive survival scenarios.
It makes perfect sense when you tie it back to the missing spreadsheets. We aren't dreaming about typing on a keyboard because typing on a keyboard never saved a caveman's life.
Exactly.
But recognizing the silhouette of a predator in the brush and immediately running, that biological reflex kept your genes in the gene pool.
The brain fundamentally does not care about your emails. It cares about your survival. And we actually saw this ancient evolutionary mechanism kick into absolute overdrive very recently on a global scale.
Oh, really?
Let's look at the clinical studies from 2020 through 2024, examining dream data during the COVID-19 pandemic.
The pandemic dreams phenomenon. For a while there, everyone was talking about how vivid, strange, and terrifying their dreams had suddenly become.
The clinical data confirms it wasn't just anecdotal chatter on social media. Nightmare frequencies spiked massively across the globe.
I remember that.
People were reporting incredibly vivid, high-definition, negatively charged dreams. Now, Under the daily continuity hypothesis alone, you might expect people to just dream about being bored in their living rooms or staring out a window, since that was what they were doing all day.
Right.
But under the threat simulation theory, the data makes perfect sense. The brain perceived a severe, invisible threat in the waking world. It knew survival was on the line.
So the simulator booted up to maximum capacity.
Exactly.
But you can't really fight a virus in a dream. So people were dreaming about being attacked by tangible things, invisible monsters, swarms of bugs, or zombies breaking into their homes.
Yes. The brain took the abstract waking anxiety of the virus and turned it into a physical, visceral threat to rehearse against.
That is so smart.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it completely changes how we view bad dreams.
Yeah.
In traditional clinical psychology, a nightmare is often viewed as a failure of the brain's emotional regulation.
A sign that you are overwhelmed.
Right. But from an evolutionary perspective, a nightmare isn't a failure at all. A nightmare is the threat simulator working exactly as designed at peak capacity to prepare you for survival in a dangerous world. It is running emergency drills.
Okay, so the brain simulates threats to keep our reflexes sharp and keep us alive. It's an evolutionary fire drill.
Yes.
But wait, I'm losing you a bit on the logic of the simulation itself. If the goal is to rehearse survival, why is the simulator so entirely unhinged?
What do you mean?
Like, things transform into other things. The laws of physics completely break down. If it's a survival simulator, why isn't it a realistic simulator? Why does the bear suddenly turn into my high school math teacher halfway through the chase?
To understand why this simulation is so bizarre, we have to introduce a modern mathematical framework. We have to look at the overfitted brain hypothesis, or OBH.
Okay.
This hypothesis takes everything we know about neurobiology and compares the human brain to deep neural networks, the complex artificial intelligence systems we use today.
Here's where it gets really interesting. But wait, I need you to clarify this. How is my biological, squishy brain anything like a piece of artificial intelligence code running on a server?
At a foundational level, both systems learn by recognizing patterns through networks of connections.
Okay.
In machine learning, when you train an AI to recognize a pattern, say you want an AI in a self-driving car to identify a stop sign, you feed it thousands of pictures of stop signs.
Makes sense.
But if you train that AI too rigidly on a perfect, pristine data set, it suffers from a major mathematical flaw called overfitting.
Meaning it memorizes the training data perfectly. It knows exactly what a pristine, well-lit, perfectly red stop sign looks like on a sunny day.
Exactly that. It memorizes the specifics instead of learning the general rule. So when you put that overfitted AI into a self-driving car in the real world, and it encounters a stop sign that has graffiti on it, or is half covered in snow, or is obscured by a tree branch.
The AI completely fails to recognize it.
Right. It can't generalize. It became too rigid in its learning. It overfitted to the perfect examples.
So how do computer scientists fix an AI that has become too rigid?
They artificially inject noise into the training data.
Noise?
Yeah, they deliberately feed the AI corrupted inputs, warped images, and bizarre data points. They might show it a stop sign that is green, or a stop sign upside down.
Oh, I see.
This constant injection of noise forces the neural network to stop memorizing perfect examples and instead learn the deeper, generalized rules of what a stop sign actually is.
Yeah.
It forces the artificial system to stay flexible.
And the overfitted brain hypothesis argues that the human brain faces the exact same mathematical problem.
Precisely.
Every single day of your life, you are learning. You are performing highly repetitive routines. You're driving the exact same route to work, doing the exact same tasks, interacting with the exact same people.
Yes.
Your biological neural networks are in constant danger of overfitting to the specific, boring, highly predictable data of your daily life.
And if your biological brain overfits to your daily routine, you lose your cognitive flexibility. You become less creative, less adaptable to novel situations, and entirely unprepared for the unexpected.
So what does the biological brain do to prevent this? It actively injects biological noise.
Yes.
Dreams. Dreams are the biological noise injection.
That is the core of the hypothesis. During REM sleep, the brain actively creates corrupted sensory inputs.
Wow.
It does this through random, unpredictable synaptic firings across your neural networks. It takes your waking memories and violently warps them, breaks them apart, and combines them in totally illogical ways.
So the bizarre, hallucinatory, category-breaking nature of dreams isn't a mistake.
No, it is purposefully weird. By forcing your brain to process a bear turning into a math teacher, it prevents your neural pathways from becoming too rigidly memorized to yesterday's routine.
I love this concept. It's like shaking a cognitive etch-a-sketch.
Well, that's good.
Right. If you just draw the exact same rigid line day after day, eventually the gears get stuck. You lose the ability to draw anything else. Dreams come in and violently shake the etch-a-sketch, throwing random chaotic noise across the screen, disrupting those rigid memory loops so that the gears loosen up and you can draw something entirely new tomorrow.
The etch-a-sketch analogy is remarkably accurate to the neurobiology. The very strangeness of dreams, their radical divergence from waking experience, is exactly what gives them their biological function.
That's incredible.
Our brain is essentially heating up its neural pathways with bizarre, chaotic hallucinations so they don't freeze into rigid, uncreative, overfitted loops. It forces generalization.
That perfectly explains the long historical association between dreams and human creativity.
Exactly.
Think about how many massive scientific discoveries or famous pieces of art or literature were supposedly inspired by a dream. It isn't magic. It's because the biological noise of the dream literally broke the rigid, overfitted thought pattern the scientist or artist was stuck in during the day. It forced a new connection.
The overfitted brain hypothesis brilliantly united all the disparate data we've discussed. It explains the raw physiology we started with. Those erratic PGO waves in the brainstem are the biological noise generators.
Right.
It explains the psychological continuity. The noise is applied directly to the specific emotional data we gathered during our waking hours.
Which is why we dream about our anxieties.
Yes. And it explains the evolutionary utility. By keeping the brain flexible and constantly rehearsing bizarre variations of threats, it ensures we can survive novel, unpredictable dangers in the real world.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive with you running from a grizzly bear in the grocery store without any pants on.
It means that that specific, terrifying dream is actually a brilliant, multi-layered neurobiological intersection.
Let's break it down.
Physiologically, it is driven by your brainstem injecting necessary biological noise into your neural networks.
Oh.
Psychologically, the feeling of profound vulnerability, represented by your lack of pants, is shaped by whatever waking emotional insecurities you are currently dealing with in your real life.
Ugh, too true.
Evolutionarily, the bear is your ancient, ancestral threat simulator running an emergency survival drill. And mathematically, the sheer absurdity of the grocery store setting is functioning to keep your neural networks flexible and prevent cognitive overfitting.
Your brain is an absolute masterpiece of biological engineering. I mean, you should care deeply about your dreams, no matter how weird, stressful, or terrifying they might be.
Absolutely.
Because they are absolute proof that your brain is actively working off the clock. It's running the night shift. It's conducting emergency survival drills and defragmenting your biological hard drive so you have the cognitive flexibility to handle whatever unpredictable reality throws at you the very next day.
And that leaves us with a rather profound and, frankly, slightly alarming final thought to consider regarding our modern habits.
Okay, what is it?
If our biological brains strictly require the bizarre, unstructured, internally generated noise of dreams to prevent cognitive overfitting, what happens to us in the modern digital age?
Uh-oh.
Think about what so many of us do right before we go to sleep. We lie in bed, doom-scrolling.
Yep, guilty.
We feed our brains highly curated, entirely predictable, algorithmic content right up until the exact moment we close our eyes. Those algorithms are mathematically designed to show us exactly what we already agree with and exactly what we expect to see.
They are essentially flooding our brains with heavily overfitted data.
So the question is, by flooding our minds with rigid, algorithmic certainty right before sleep, are we suppressing our brain's natural ability to generate the bizarre, chaotic noise it desperately needs?
Wow.
Are we robbing our own brains of the very cognitive flexibility we require to survive in a rapidly changing world?
That is a chilling thought, and definitely something to chew on tonight when you reach for your phone in the dark. Put the phone down, let your brain be weird.
Seriously. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the science of sleep. Please be sure to subscribe and share the channel, What the Study Says, with anyone who has ever wondered why they dream. We wish you a good and wonderfully weird night of sleep. Have a great night.